All right. So first off, thanks so much for joining me. My first question for you is tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the mental health realm.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Kathryn. Apologies for my voice right now. I'm a little bit sick. Um, yeah, I started in this field, oh gosh, 2009, initially working with children and youth coming from disenfranchised populations. And then I just felt like I was working at many schools, and then I moved to a big school division, and I just kind of felt like I wanted to get deeper into sort of one-on-one therapeutic work with young people. So I went and got my further education and became a psychologist. And yeah, now I work actually not that often with kids and youth anymore, mostly with adults. But yeah, just wanting to go a bit deeper with people.
Mm-hmm. That was my next question. Tell me a little bit about your work as a psychologist, because you just said that you work with kids and adults. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, just kind of dive into a little bit about your role. Yeah.
Sure. So I have a private practice in Calgary where I see people anywhere between the ages of like 7 all the way up to however old you want to be when you go to therapy. Usually just individuals. Occasionally I'll work with youth and their parents. Um, yeah, so that's here. And then I also live and work in New Zealand, where I contract to a company um, where we get referrals from brain injury incidents. So any kind of traumatic brain injury. And so I get to do that kind of work here as well.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the methods and approaches that you use in your current work? Because I've heard about EMDR and CBT, but there are other methods that are out there. So, but what specific method or approach do you use for your current practice?
Yeah, so my favorite approach is attachment focused EMDR. I specialize in trauma. So that's the one that I use probably the most, or definitely the most. And then I take aspects from compassionate inquiry and acceptance and commitment therapy.
Hmm.
Yeah, mindfulness-based therapies, somatic, kind of incorporate a whole bunch of different things depending on the need and yeah, what the client is comfortable with. So,
Yeah. So, like what have people, who have come to see you for, um, have come to your practice, like patients, what have they said, when they see you and work with you, what are some of the common themes that you sort of notice that, people come to you for, like,
good question. Yeah. So what I'm always looking for is what sort of the underlying belief is that's causing the sort of behavior or the difficulty or the concern that they're coming in with. So they might come to me and be like, oh my gosh, I have anxiety or depression, or I just don't feel like myself or whatever. And so what we'll do is to try to like dig deep and understand, when did this first start for you? And what did like the reason why you had to kind of start operating with anxiety or low mood or a defense mechanism of some sort? And what was the belief under that? And commonly the beliefs are things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm broken, or I'm too much, or things like that that sort of come up for us over and over and over again in our life. So yeah, those are some of the really common beliefs. I'm too sensitive, I'm too dramatic, yeah, not enough, those things. Does that
yeah,
make sense? Enough?
yeah, it's a whole bunch of things. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so like tell me a little bit about sort of the impact that doing this kind of work has not just on has on like yourself. Like what have you learned in doing this kind of work and what do you still hope to learn, or are curious about, wanting to pursue further?
Gosh, that's such a good question. Heaps, holy smokes. This doing this kind of work is such an immense privilege. Holy smokes. Every day I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this. Like it's so incredible to observe and witness humans overcome some of the biggest things, right? And it encourages me to continue down my own path of healing, which I do actively. I am of the belief that all psychologists should have psychologists. So continuing with my own therapy. And because I have to be really well regulated and feel like my mental health is in a good place, then that really encourages me to continue with my practice of self-care. And that's like, going to therapy and doing all the things that I know are healthy for me, meditating and journaling and that kind of stuff. So it's highly motivating. And plus, Alberta, it's actually part of our mandate. We are required to do self-care, which I think is awesome. Um, so yeah, that's a big thing. I also, and maybe this is taboo, but I also do my own therapy with plant medicine. So I've been going to retreats and doing psilocybin under the supervision of therapists and things like that. That's amazing. And that's an area that I want to continue exploring myself, possibly offering that therapy one day when it's legal. Um, and yeah, so that's a really cool thing that I'm exploring personally, as well as some more energetic healing, which doesn't make sense to me yet, but maybe one day will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
My next question is, how can mental health be sort of a great way to sort of help patients, deal with whatever situation they may have? Because obviously here in America, there's a presidential election coming up, and people are so anxious, they don't know where the country's going to head. So, like, how can mental health be sort of you know, that aid to or help benefit to people who are anxious or on the edge about a lot of things?
Like, how can therapy be helpful?
Uh-huh, exactly.
Yeah. Hmm. And I mean, I'm kind of biased because this is my profession, but I think it can be super helpful. Um, yeah, like to be able to come to a space where there is no judgment, um, where they're held and every single part of them is welcome in that space every time, so they could show up and present in any kind of way, yelling, screaming, crying, laughing maniacally, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're going to be accepted and held. I don't mean physically held, I mean emotionally held. Um, and then the next time, same exact approach. And there's something about that experience that can be really healing in and of itself, just building that relationship with folks, being heard and being seen on a consistent basis. And then, like I mentioned earlier, understanding the underlying cause of the anxiety. Why did that start for you in the first place? That you had to feel anxious or that you had to be hypervigilant, for example. Why did you have to be hypervigilant? As babies, we're not like that. We just scream when we're hungry and tired and, stuff like that. We don't consider anything else. But at some point, we had to shift that. And so my approach anyways is I try to learn why that happened, when that happened, and then we can go back to that place and sort of mend those wounds so that it doesn't have to keep happening anymore, because it was adaptive at one point and then sometimes it becomes maladaptive, right? The anxiety is too much anxiety. Does that make sense kind of?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. Lastly, to kind of wrap this up, what can psychologists who are trying to enter the mental health field, what can they sort of learn to sort of be prepared to enter this challenging but fun and interesting field? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. It's a it's not an easy profession, and there's definitely a learning curve. Um, I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned is that in any relationship, therapeutic relationship, you never know who the teacher is and who the student is. So I think that it's so valuable for us as professionals to understand the power that we hold in a dynamic and to recognize we don't have the answers. We're also human, and more often than not, our clients are teaching us just as much as we're teaching them. And to really learn the strategies to kind of create like an energetic sphere around you as the practitioner, not to block out anything, but to filter some of the, because we're told everything, right? You hear the worst of the worst that you could possibly imagine in society. And if you're not careful, you can take that on and you can hold it. And oh, then there's vicarious trauma and all those things. So learning those skills to really energetically protect yourself and make sure that you're really well resourced, and knowing when you're not, and when you can say, that's too many clients in a day, or this case is actually too close to my heart and I can't accept that and I need to refer, and all of those little nuanced practices that really, yeah, making sure that you're healthy. Because if we're not, and if we're not mentally and emotionally in a good space, we're not going to be helping anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then also the tendency not to rescue, because when we do that, we take people's, autonomy and agency away from them. And we don't want to do that either. So I'm
No.
like, and this, and this, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. All
Yeah.
right.